I'm going to introduce myself as your speaker today. I'm going to speak just for a little while on this topic of vibrations. You might be surprised to learn that EDGAR CAYCE talks about vibrations in about 2,000 different readings. And we got copies of 14,306, so you can see that it is a topic of interest in the readings, and he has a lot to say about how every one of us has an impact and is associated with this topic of vibrations. Now, we might understand how vibrations could be like a pebble thrown out into the water, and then that creates a ripple effect over and over and over again, one ripple coming out after another. And that is, in fact, vibrations. And probably about maybe a third of you, maybe half out there in the audience, remember the Beach Boys song from the 1960s, Good Vibrations, that somehow people have vibrations and they put off vibrations that we can feel. One of my earliest experiences with that was at a country club I worked with. I worked in the accounting department in Colorado, and there were two managers of the country club. One was over food and beverage, and one was over activities, like they had a tennis court, several golf courses, swimming, everything. And the one over food and beverage was a former Marine, and he stood at attention in the dining room and would like stare at people constantly. And I was a waiter there for a while as well. When he walked into the dining room, swear to God, it was like the whole room closed in. And if anyone was smiling, a waiter or waitress, they stopped smiling because he was so serious. And he put off this vibe of structure, being at attention, not having any fun, and just being around him at work had that energy. And the other guy, his name was Bud Hall, every once in a while in the accounting department would come in and he'd say things like, everyone looks too serious here, I need someone to make an emergency run to the Dairy Queen for everyone. And he'd give the security card to go to Dairy Queen and get something. And just being around him was a whole different experience. And so people put off a vibration. And we can probably imagine what people we've never met, what their vibration might be. For example, being around someone like a Mother Teresa would be very different than being around a comedian or being around someone running for political office. So even if we've never met these people, we might imagine what it's like to be around people based on what they do, what they think, how they behave. Because all of us have vibrations. And actually, when we talk about this in a minute, a lot of people involved in ARE don't really know this, but the whole purpose of the Search for God program is to raise your vibration. It is to create a higher vibration, much like the Christ. That's what the whole purpose of Search for God is all about, raising your vibration. The readings also say that places have vibration, and that the vibration is created by what happens in that place. And in the readings, he actually told people to go into a church or a synagogue when it was empty and just feel what it feels like. And then go into a post office when it's empty and see what it feels like. Because activity creates vibration. And I remember almost 40 years ago walking into the meditation room up here on the third floor for the very first time and being blown away by the energy there. And I've been other places, and this is going to sound crazy to some of you, but I feel the same thing at Disney World. There is something when people are on vacation that they create an energy that you can feel just by being there. Lots of people come here and say it's just like coming home. So the energy of a place creates a vibration. And in addition to that, CAYCE said, and I quote, each state, country, or town makes its own vibrations by or through the activities of those that comprise same. In other words, people in a city, a community, they create a vibration. And then that vibration creates an energy all its own. In addition to that, all of our senses, the five senses operate on vibration. So for example, you may not realize this, but sight is a vibration. And what happens is that the images we think we see are actually electrical impulses, electrical vibrations, that the brain translates into the perception of sight. So all of our senses operate on this idea of vibration. And vibrations permeate us all the time. They surround us. I heard Hugh Lynn Casey used to say on several occasions that ultimately, because of our vibration, we hurt or heal everyone we come in contact with, even if we cross them in the hall, because of the vibration we're putting out. So we're constantly either working with healing people or harming them because of the thoughts we think, the things that we leave behind. Now, some of you may know that Cayce was able to read people, give them readings based on their vibration. On a number of occasions, he would be given the name and address of somebody, and he would go to tune into that person at a certain time, a certain place they were supposed to be there, and they had forgotten the appointment, or maybe they had got held up somewhere in town, and so he would give a reading based on their vibration. Here's a few examples. Gertrude Cayce, you will go over this body, carefully examine it thoroughly, and tell me the conditions you find at the present time. You will diagnose the case thoroughly, giving the cause of the existing conditions, also the treatment for the cure and relief of this body. EDGAR CAYCE. Yes, we find those impressions of the body, the vibrations. Don't find the body here. This as we gain from those impressions of the individual as has been here from time to time. So we leave behind our vibrations kind of like a residue. Another person. We have those impressions. The body has just stepped out. Another occasion. Yes, we have the desires as expressed of the body, though we do not find the body physically here. Now, the first mention of vibrations actually occurred in 1909. It was given in a health reading, and Cayce talked about how this child had gotten ill because the vibrations of their various body systems were out of whack. In terms of health, Cayce essentially suggests two things. One, that disease manifests when the vibrations have changed in the body somehow, when the body's systems are no longer operating at the appropriate vibration. And two, he suggests that every healing modality, whether it's massage or surgery or taking a pill, an aspirin, whatever it might be, has a vibration. And that vibration helps to bolster or stimulate or put back in alignment whatever body system it's trying to treat. In terms of healing, one of the readings says, for all healing comes from the one source, and whether there's the application of foods, exercise, medicine, or even the knife, it is to bring the consciousness of the forces within the body that aid in reproducing themselves, which is the awareness of creative or God forces. Now, there's many stories in the readings about how vibrations work and how it affects people, but two of my favorite are as follows. There was a woman who had a very severe case of depression, and she would really cripple herself with depression. She'd stay home. She was so unhappy, didn't want to go out. And when she did go out, she'd get all dressed up, and one of her favorite things to do was to wear pearls, go out and be with friends, socialize, things like that. Eventually, she got a reading on her depression. And Cayce walked her through some treatments to try some things to do, and so she'd work with them. And she'd start to feel great. She'd get all dolled up and go out again, and she'd start to get depressed. And this happened over and over again. She'd start to feel well, go out, all dressed up, get depressed, start back with a treatment. So she got a reading and asked what was going on. And Cayce told her that her pearls had absorbed the vibration of depression. And every time she was putting them on, she was reinfecting herself. And that's what the problem was. Now, once something has been infused with vibration, you can change the energy. You can change it with a higher vibration like prayer, music, raising the vibration through maybe laying on of hands, healing. But all of our clothes, everything has a vibration that we are putting off. Another woman was told she had arteriosclerosis, and she lived in the same house for a long time. And Cayce mentions as an aside that because of her problem, because she's lived there so long, that if she was ever to move, the next person that moves into that house is going to be prone to arteriosclerosis because the vibration goes with it. So when we get something at a garage sale, we need to somehow heal that vibration, change it. And sometimes a psychic who works with psychometry, what they do is they read into the person, tune into the person based on the vibration. Now, in addition, vibrations have an affinity and they have a repulsion. They act like a magnet. So certain kinds of vibrations draw us to one another. So, for example, criminals are attracted to one another because of vibration. They've actually done studies where they have people meditate in a high crime district, and crime kind of stops during that period they're meditating, because there's also a repulsion energy. So affinity and repulsion with vibration. My favorite story, I'm sure some of you have heard me tell this before, well, as background, some of you know I have had this, maybe it's a crazy thing, I don't know, but I had this a connection to the Noah's Ark story. And when I graduated from AU, I actually did my thesis on Noah's Ark, and then I eventually wrote a novel on Noah's Ark. There was a time when I had 300 Noah's Arks in my office at home. We moved. Do not send me any Noah's Arks. I only have 100 left, so that's plenty. But when I was working on my thesis and I was working on the book, and this was over a period of 25 years, actually, one thing bothered me. And I had read I've read the Bible, I'd read lots of rabbinical papers, anything you can imagine. And the thing I could never find was Noah's mother's name. It was nowhere. Now, surely Noah had a mother, but it's not in the Bible. It was never talked about by Jewish scholars. So it was something I held in my mind constantly. Well, what was Noah's mother's name? And in 1986, I was upstairs in the library, which is where we sometimes did classes at night for Atlantic University. And I was sitting there, and all at once I was overcome with the urge that I had to go into the reserve room, which is that when you walk in the library, that's the first locked door there off to the left. I had never been in there before, but it was before class, and I asked the librarian if I could borrow the key, because there was a reason I had to go in there, and I didn't know why. And I opened the door, and I stood there, and the room, if you've never been in there, is filled with, I think it's 7 rows of books, hundreds of them. And I'm looking around in this room, wondering why I'm in there, and the top shelf, a book got my eye, and I grabbed it. It was a big giant Bible. And I had to stand on the ladder in there to get it. Got the Bible, and when I pulled it off, a little book fell off onto the floor, and the book was called The Maxims of Noah. And when I opened it up, there it said his father, Noah's father Lamech, had married a wife, Ashmua. And that was the first thing that blew me away. The second thing that blew me away was this book at the time was not indexed. When they had carted the books from the old hospital building to this building and passed them off one at a time, this had been one of the ones that had been put on a shelf and never indexed. So I could have never found it. It's since been indexed. But that's all about vibration, holding in mind what was this woman's name, opening a book. I mean, that is pretty interesting, I think. Somehow vibration. So what we hold in mind somehow comes back to us. And there's a scary component to that. Because if we hold in mind negativity, that's what comes back to us. If we hold in mind positive thoughts, the fruits of the Spirit, that's what comes back to us. Like attracts like. And what makes this even more scary, and I've written about this before, and I have not heard anyone else in ARE talk about this, but I am convinced there is a process on the spiritual path that I call negative imaging. And basically what it is the more involved we become in work like this, the easier it is for us to see what's wrong with the world. Because we're working on our own sense of perfection, and then all at once, we can see where things are out of whack. And the process is supposed to be, we direct those perceptions inward. Okay, where am I out of alignment, the readings would say. What do I need to change? What do I need to do to be a better brother's keeper? And instead what we often do, and I include myself in this, well, that person didn't do that right. Or yeah, sure, they did that good, but what about this? Well, that's not correct. And we start to see what's wrong with everyone and everything around us, and we create even a worse perception. Thoughts are things, Casey would say. And the more we dwell upon negativity, the easier it is for us to see. The readings suggest, then condemn none, for these are universal and spiritual laws that are a part of the real self as well as the universal consciousness. For like begets like in every phase of material, mental, and spiritual experience. Now, sometimes I've been in study groups and we've tried this experiment, and I'm sure some of you heard me talk about this before, where you decide to go a whole day without thinking about thought about anyone or anything. Do you know how hard that is? Look at that idiot in front of me driving. I got to start over. They forgot to put the fries in my fast food. I mean, it is very hard to go a whole day without having a negative thought. But I think it's worth trying. Because when you do that, you start to see what's right with people more often than what's wrong. And another reading, not as to what you would like for thy neighbor to be like, or what you would like for your wife to be like. Not what you would desire thy friend or thy foe to think. Not what you would like for the Creator to do, but rather, what sort of neighbor am I? And do I live that I would have my neighbor be? Do I act in a way and manner that I wish my friend, my foe to do towards me? On another occasion, I sometimes talk about this in my soulmate lecture. There was a man who came to EDGAR CAYCE for a reading, We can assume his wife wasn't there because his question was, how can I get my wife to be a better wife? And asleep there on the couch, Casey told the guy, encouraged him to go home and imagine what his wife would say a perfect husband was like. How would a perfect husband behave towards her? What would a perfect husband do? What would a perfect husband say? And when we had a whole list of all the things a perfect husband was, start doing the things on those lists, and eventually he would have a perfect wife. No follow-up in the readings as to whether or not he actually tried it, but the encouragement was there. Now, I mentioned to you that the whole purpose, really, of the Search for God program is to raise your vibration. And we've got Book 1 and Book 2. Lots of people don't know this either, but essentially all the lessons in Book 1 are repeated in various ways in Book 2 at a higher vibration, at a higher level of vibration. For 11 years, the Search for God group worked on the lessons. They had this opportunity. They were with EDGAR CAYCE in the group, and let's say they're working on cooperation. Casey wouldn't go on to the next lesson until everyone in the group had learned it. Can you imagine being in a study group and ready to move on to the next lesson and someone in the group telling you, you're not really ready for the next lesson, so we have to keep working on this one? I mean, that would be kind of a shock. But that's what that first group went with. And the other thing that lots of people don't know in Search for God is every chapter has an affirmation at the beginning of that chapter. That affirmation is an encapsulation of the vibration of that level of consciousness. Let me say that again. The affirmation for every chapter in the Search for God is an encapsulation of the vibration of that level of consciousness. So for example, this is the vibration of cooperation. Just get quiet and feel this. See if you can feel this throughout your body. Not my will, but thine, O Lord. Be done in me and through me. Let me ever be a channel of blessings today, now, to those that I contact in every way. That my coming in, my going out, be in accord with that thou would have me do. And as the call comes, here am I. Send me. Use me. That's the vibration of cooperation. And each and every one of them is like that. An encapsulation of the vibration of that level of consciousness. And the more we work with vibration, we actually expand it, and it grows, and it imbues everything that we have. And perhaps the best story of that, of how our clothing even picks up our vibration, is in Matthew, where we hear this story. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years, she had menstrual bleeding for 12 years, come behind him and touch the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. Just from touching the vibration of his clothing. So in more than 2,000 readings, Casey talked about everything is vibration. I mean, ultimately, the readings suggest, and this is a mind whammy, the only thing that exists is God. Nothing exists but God. Nothing. And everything that exists is just a different vibration of that force we call God. Whether it's us, our plants, our animals, this auditorium, everything is part of God, and it's the vibration at different levels that creates everything that we think we see. And you know, the superstring theory of physics says almost the same thing, that all forces, all the primary forces of nature are the same stuff, just vibrating at different rates of speed. This is from the readings. Where is it? Oh, there it is, right there. Okay. The basis then, know, O Israel, know, O people, the Lord thy God is one. In the manifestation of all power, force, motion, vibration, that which impels, that which detracts, in its essence, a one force, one source. So everything is vibration. Let me leave you with these 3 points. We each have a vibration as unique as a fingerprint. So all of our vibrations are as unique as a fingerprint. We affect one another, consciously and unconsciously, negatively and positively, because of vibration. And our thoughts. Casey said, essentially, thought goes out on the wings of prayer. So imagine what's happening is if we have 75 million people in this country thinking what an idiot the president is. I mean, that can't be helping the guy, right? So thoughts are things and become crimes or miracles. And the third thing, Disease manifests when a physical organ is no longer attuned to its optimum vibration. The only book Edgar Cayce wrote, he actually co-wrote it with Tom Segru, was a little booklet on auras. This is one of the things he said about vibrations. Every atom, every molecule, every group of atoms and molecules, however simple or complex, however large or small, tells the story of itself, its pattern, its purpose, through the vibrations which emanate from it. So I'd like to encourage all of us to come up with the very best we have within ourselves, the very best self, the very best vibration, and start sharing that with one another each and every day. Thank you. Okay.